The music industry has been rocked by the explosive news that Miami's iconic pillars, Jim Jones and Camron, have allegedly been arrested after a violent altercation backstage that left security stunned and the hip-hop community in complete shock. Reportedly, what was supposed to be a triumphant reunion concert devolved into a full-scale battle between two former brothers in armsies. You heard that right? With fists being thrown, harsh words being exchanged, and the aftermath being pure chaos, according to eyewitnesses. As cameras rolled in, fans were shocked, and many asked, is this really the end of Dipset? What could have possibly triggered such a public meltdown between two legends? Stay tuned, because what's coming next isn't just shocking, it's the real deal. The heated argument over the performance order quickly turned into something much darker, complete with broken equipment, shattered egos, and flashing police lights. Within minutes, both Camron and Jim were allegedly cuffed and hauled away as cameras rolled in. It all began on a night that was supposed to be a celebration. When fans flocked to see the long-awaited reunion of Dipset, Camron, Jim Jones, Jules, Santana, and Freaky Zicky. The venue was a hive of nostalgia, with people wearing vintage Dipset merchandise, listening to old songs on their phones, and sharing anecdotes about how these artists influenced a whole era of hip-hop. But trust us, this is just the beginning. Tension behind the scenes had been building for weeks, and tonight it was going to explode in a way that would change everything. Word started to spread around midnight, and soon after, frantic social media posts gave way to video clips from backstage. At first, it was difficult to tell what was happening because of the shaky footage, blurred faces, and muffled yelling. But it was evident that Run and Jim Jones were having a heated argument. And it wasn't just verbal. Chairs were overturned, equipment was smashed, and voices were raised to deafening levels. Just minutes before they were scheduled to perform, together, two brothers who had previously been inseparable got into a full-fledged argument. According to sources, the altercation started over something as trivial as a setlist change. Apparently, Jim Jones wanted to start the show with his toe, with his Ducana, with his solo hit We Fly High, while Camron insisted they stick to a classic Dipset track. What should have been a small argument turned into a major altercation when old wounds were reopened. Accused Cam of constantly attempting to control the spotlight, while Cam retaliated for Jim's disloyalty and going solo when the group was disintegrating. The room was crowded with security guards, stylists, and other people trying to defuse the situation, but neither man was backing down. According to one crew member, it was like watching a family implode in front of us. The fight wasn't just physical. It was emotional. Both men shouted things that had obviously been buried for years. Jim reportedly screamed, "You left me out. Too dry when I most needed you," Cam retorted. "You've always been jealous of me." Those close to the group acknowledged that, despite their previous public reconciliation, things were never really patched up behind closed doors. Tonight, all the forced interviews and fake smiles came undone in a matter of seconds as the chaos unfolded backstage. Fans outside were when security called to report a violent altercation that left two staff members injured, one with a busted lip and the other with a sprained wrist from trying to separate Cam and Jim. Police arrived on the scene to find both rappers visibly bruised and still yelling at each other as they were pulled apart. The footage of their arrest went viral, and someone from the crew captured Camron being escorted out in cuffs, his face red with rage. The crowd was growing restless. The show had been delayed for more than an hour, and people were starting to chant, not knowing what was happening. The crowd outside the venue watched in shock as the two were led into separate police cars shortly after his chain tore his voice from yelling. Fans screamed their names. Some pleaded for them to stop, and others just recorded the moment in stunned silence. What was supposed to be a triumphant return had instead become a nightmare. Media outlets picked up the story within minutes, and social media was inundated with headlines like "Dipset reunion ends in chaos" and "Camron and Jim Jones arrested after backstage fight." People started sharing old videos of the two laughing together. In one Twitter user wrote, "We grew up on Dipset. Feels like our big brothers fighting." The internet was ablaze with reactions, some shocked, some angry, and some saying they saw coming from a mile away. Inside the jail that night, neither Cam nor Jim spoke to each other. They were placed in separate holding cells, and even though their legal teams arrived quickly, the damage was already done. Interviews recalling their bond and comparing it to the violent fallout that had just occurred made the betrayal feel personal to many fans who raised us. Jill Santana, who had been getting ready in his dressing room when the fight started, reportedly tried to mediate once he saw things getting heated, but by the time he reached them, it was too late. According to someone close to the situation, both men were shaken, not only from the fight, but also from the reality of how far they have fallen. One insider shared, Jim kept pacing, asking how it got to this point. Cam just sat with his head down. It was the silence after the storm, and it said more than any punch ever could. Jules, a member of the team, yelled after everything we've been through, "Not like this, man." Insiders claim that he broke down backstage and needed to be comforted by his team after witnessing two of his closest friends being dragged away by police. The fallout was immediate as sponsors withdrew from the tour, fans demanded refunds, and concert promoters started reevaluating future Dipset shows. Industry insiders whispered that this could be the last nail in the coffin, as they were already on thin ice. Social media only made the drama worse. Fans argued over who was at fault, with some accusing Camron of being overbearing and others accusing Jim of being insecure and violent. Regardless of the side people took, it was obvious that the dip was over. But even in the midst of the chaos, other artists expressed their sorrow and hope for peace on social media. One post said, "Come on, dip up, y'all are bigger than this. Fix it before it's too late." Late. Others said, "Hip-hop needs you all together, not split apart like this." As the dust settled and the city attempted to comprehend what had just transpired, it was unclear whether or not Cam and Jim would hear those words. However, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Just when everyone believed the drama had peaked, an unexpected event occurred the following morning. And the following morning, just when everyone believed the drama had reached its climax, a leaked voicemail purportedly from Jim Jones, recorded just hours after the fight while he was still in custody, started making the rounds online. Jim's voice was low, tired, and filled with pain, and he spoke slowly as if every word weighed him down. "I'm not even mad at Camron," he said. "We let the fans down. We let Dipset down." By lunchtime, big hip-hop pages were repeating the audio, which no one could initially verify was authentic. With headlines like "Jim Jones regrets everything" and "The end of Dipset hits harder than we thought," fans were divided. Some sympathized with him after hearing his voice of regret, while others wondered if the message was a shrewd attempt to curry favor behind the scenes. According to those close to him, Camron was not only about the fight, but also about how quickly Jim's camp had begun damage control. He believes Jim is trying to spin the story, according to an insider who claimed Cam feels betrayed again. Meanwhile, Jules Santana was doing everything he could to keep things from falling apart completely. He started contacting both camps, baiting them to meet to clear the air, but neither Cam nor Jim responded. However, things were far more chaotic than anyone had anticipated. Was prepared, but they were both too overcome by years of unresolved tension. Even Freaky Ziki, who had always been the comic relief, became silent. His team issued a brief statement in which he expressed his deep sadness over the events and asked fans to give the group time to heal. What made matters worse was that the fight had more than just impacted Dipset. It had also exposed old wounds in the hip-hop community. Artists who had previously looked up to the group started to speak out. Some expressed their disappointment, while others shared stories of previous tensions they had personally witnessed. However, late that night, a new clip leaked from the venue's backstage surveillance camera. Unlike the previous fan film videos, This one was crystal clear and showed the moment Camron shoved Jim into a stack of speaker cases, followed by Jim swinging back and knocking over a table. The producer told a blog that he had witnessed Cam and Jim argue over money years ago, during a recording session, and that the brotherhood had been crumbling for a long time. Was silent, but the violence spoke for itself. Fans were appalled to see their heroes act in this manner. Additional videos showed crew members rushing to break up the altercation, with Jules trying to pull Jim away as a security guard pushed Cam back against a wall. The video caused hashtags like #DipsetDownfall and #CamsHim to trend on the internet. And news outlets analyzed every frame like a sports replay. Experts even commented that Cam's stance revealed deeply ingrained the label funding the Dipset tour, put everything on hold, canceled future dates, frozen contracts, and pulled all reunion-related merchandise from shelves. Behind the scenes, the consequences were becoming very real. Jim's movement revealed emotional instability, and it turned into a media circus. Memes went viral, interviews were requested, and even talk shows began referencing the fight as the week's biggest pop culture moment. One insider called the situation a financial disaster, and Cam's team blamed Jim. Jim's team accused Cam of being manipulative and controlling. And dozens of staff, dancers, and tech crew members who had been depending on the tour for work were caught in the middle. Camron, who was known for his savage clapbacks and sharp tongue, finally broke his silence 2 days later when he posted a black screen on Instagram with the single sentence, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than words." Fans were perplexed and asked whether it was acceptance, shade, or the end in the comments. In the meantime, Jim Jones made a brief, obviously tearful Instagram Live, saying, "We're supposed to be legends, not a headline. I'm ashamed of how I acted. I lost my cool, but I'm not the only one." While some pleaded for a truce, others criticized Cam for being passive-aggressive. As anticipated, this simply strengthened the accusations made by the Firecam supporters that Jim was gaslighting them. "At least he was owning up," he said, in defense of him. And amidst all this chaos, Dipset's legacy was slowly unraveling. Radio stations pulled Dipset tracks from their daily playlists, unsure how the public would react. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to the fight, with some suggesting that this was the most public group meltdown since MU. Others compared it to the fall of June. One host said, "This is what happens when ego goes unchecked for too long." Then came the biggest twist of all. A woman came forward and said she had seen the fight and that it had nothing to do with music but rather a woman. According to her, Camron and Jim Jones had been romantically involved with the same woman for years, and recent events had rekindled that tension. She said that Jim had found out that Cam had secretly reconnected with her, which was what started the argument backstage. No one could confirm her account, but the internet didn't care because it was juicy, scandalous, and the kind of twist that fans love. The fight was now being framed as a failed love triangle, and people made jokes about Dipset being the new reality show drama. Others expressed disappointment, saying that two legends should never throw away decades of legacy over a woman. However, whether the story was true or not, it changed the narrative once more. By this point, Cam and Jim were both out on bail, but they were also under a court order to keep apart until the case was resolved. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The hip-hop community waited to see what would happen next after one veteran artist stated in a radio interview, "This isn't beef. This is heartbreak." They had once toured the world together, but were now unable to be in the same room because of lawyers, damage control teams, and overtime. However, just when everything appeared to be at its lowest point, a phone call was unexpected and would completely alter the course of events. As the days went by and the public awaited it, tensions continued rising. The truth was that nobody really knew what the future held for Dipset. Could they salvage what was left of their legacy, or had the damage been irreparable? Camron, known for his cool demeanor, had been unusually quiet after the incident. and his social media accounts, which were typically filled with cryptic messages and jokes, had turned. Behind the scenes, Camron and Jim Jones were dealing with more than just their personal transgression. They were dealing with the ripple effect of their actions. Fans, the media, and even their close circles were divided about what had happened. While Jim Jones was more outspoken, his Twitter feed was full of comments about the situation, apologizing to fans to discourage supporters. And even to Camron, it's been a difficult road. But I'm learning and growing. In contrast, Camron's eerily silent fans, especially those who had supported him for years, were beginning to worry that they hadn't seen him like this before. Previously, he was the one to make light of a situation to turn drama into something laughable. But this time there was no humor in his posts, and he wasn't even posting. Growing, he tweeted, but fans weren't totally convinced. Some applauded him for admitting his mistakes, while others believed it was just another ploy to win back the love he had lost. But it doesn't change the fact that the damage is done. "We won't forget what happened, Jim," one fan wrote. The mixed reactions only seemed to add fuel to the fire. But yet, despite the drama and public division, there was a sense of inevitability. The big question was still looming over everything, though, with Dipset's permanent breakup. Was this the end of one of the most iconic hip-hop groups of all time? Fans were divided. Some still believed in the group's strength and the bond that had brought them together years ago, while others felt betrayed and their loyalty shaken to the core. Meanwhile, Jules Santana, who had always served as the mediator between the two, was caught in the middle of it all. According to sources close to him, Jules was frustrated and hurt by the entire situation he had tried for so long to resolve. This was the source that claimed Camron and Jim Jones hadn't spoken in days. Maintain harmony between Jim and Camron. And now it seemed like all that work was falling apart. But despite his frustration, Jules was determined to put things right. He knew that if there was any chance of things getting better, it had to begin with him. So he took matters into his own hands and reached out to Jim Jones and Camron separately in an attempt to set up a private meeting. He knew it had to be in person. There couldn't be any more phone calls or cryptic messages. It had to be genuine. After a few tense days, Jules was able to get both Camron and although Camron, who is known for his sharp tongue and quick wit, was unusually quiet, Jim Jones was more open and had been considering the consequences of his actions. He was ready to address everything. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence as the two men sat opposite each other, the weight of their history and their recent fallout hanging heavy in the air. This moment was monumental because it was the first time since the brawl that the two had agreed to speak. "You know, Jim," he started slowly, breaking the stillness. "You disrespected me, not just in front of fans, but in front of family. That hurt." His voice was firm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "I know, and I can't take it back, but I'm here now, and I want to fix this. I want us to get past this, Cam," Jim Jones said with obvious remorse. It was evident that there was still a deal of hurt and mistrust between them. But as the conversation went on, there were times when it seemed like a reconciliation might be possible. They talked about their shared history, including the times when Dipset was at the top of the rap game. They laughed and reminisced, and for a brief moment, it felt like they were back in the studio together, creating magic. But reality soon set in with the damage. Camron paused for a moment as if weighing his options. "You said that before. Jim ** had been completed, and the path to recovery was not going to be simple." Meanwhile, fans were still waiting for a public statement from Camron. And Jim Jones and the suspense was killing them. They wanted answers, wanted to know if Dipset was truly over or if the two could work things out. Fans flocked to social media, demanding an update, asking whether Dipset was over or not. One fan wrote, "You both hurt the fans. Now you need to fix this." The pressure was mounting. Jim Jones followed suit with a message of his own genuine talk, saying, "We've been down too long. We're stronger than this. Stay with us." However, these messages didn't provide any specific answers that gave fans hope that perhaps Dipset wasn't done after all. Eventually, the time came when Camron posted a new message on Instagram. It was brief, but said, "Sometimes the strongest bonds are tested. We've been through a lot. We'll figure it out. Stay tuned." Asterisk, as the story developed, the hip-hop world watched closely as Camron and Jim Jones, two icons who had once dominated the rap game together, fought for their legacy. Would they find a way to heal, or was it really over? The news of the Backstage Brawl spread like wildfire, rocking the hip-hop world. It was too little, too late. Could the fans forgive them for the public spectacle, the fight, and the betrayal? Or had they pushed the group too far and damaged it beyond repair?